Hey guys, this is Eric here with Josh and Mallory. How you guys today?
I'm doing great.
Pretty awesome. How are you, Eric?
Doing well, doing well. Excited for it to be consistently nice out. It was kind of cold today, but there's been some nice days. Saturday was a great day. So
Boy.
looking forward. I really enjoy this time of year because you get the whole summer in front of you, which
Mm-hmm.
is cool. So welcome everybody to our call. We're the Live the Movie team, and this is our weekly Google Hangout team meeting. And our group here is a personal development group that's really focused on helping each of us achieve our goals so that we can grow and become the person we want to be, but also be able to contribute beyond ourselves and help other people. And we came up with the theme of Live the Movie because sometimes when you just talk about things in terms of a black and white in terms, and you think of personal development, one of the first things that you learn is to look at obstacles as opportunities, which is an interesting way of looking at things. But a lot of times you say, well, I'd rather not go through obstacles, or if I overcome this obstacle, then I'm just going to be back where I was before I started, which isn't that exciting, and onwards and stuff like that. So we came up with this theme because a lot of times when you attach a story to something, or you feel that you're a part of an adventure or a story or something like that, it becomes more exciting. So if you think of any good story-based movie, whether it was obviously a movie, but or it could be a book or something like that, and you think of the main character or characters have some goal that they want to achieve, and they think if they achieve that they'll be happy or fulfilled or important, or whatever feeling that they think they're missing in their life right now, they think that the feeling comes afterwards once you achieve something, instead of bringing about that feeling now and helping them to achieve those goals by becoming more of who they really are by just cultivating those feelings. So our group really focuses on the fact that when things are going really well, we root you along, we keep you going, because sometimes that's tough too, because I actually watched a video, and there's different people that teach this in a different way, but the concept called like the law of the lid, or reaching your threshold, or different terms like that, which basically means that actually things go so good or are going so well that you actually screw it up because you fear that it's not going to last, which is kind of interesting. But we all kind of hit that moment where you get kind of overwhelmed, and if you have a group around you, say, hey, focus on this, keep it going. And then obviously when you're being challenged, you can point to the fact, hey, this is the part in the story where most people would give up, but the main character keeps going, and that's you, and we're really going to make it happen. So that's what we do in terms of a theme of our group. And then in terms of what we actually do is every 3 or 4 months our group gets together and we have a mastermind. So for 2 or 3 days we get together, we learn some deeper level personal development stuff and really reinforce what we've been learning. And then on a regular basis we have goals that we set. We each have a big goal that we set for a 12-month period of time. And then each week we have these calls as a way of holding each other accountable. And usually we don't talk directly about our goals, but the way we stay on track for them is we actually read a book every month. And this month, which actually ended yesterday, but we'll talk about it one more time today, we're reading this book, The Mastery of Self, A Toltec Guide to Personal Freedom by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. And what it does is, just like in sports, there's fundamentals. And in learning personal development, there's also fundamentals. But just like in sports, the fundamentals can kind of get boring. How many free throws and layups can you shoot before you're bored out of your mind? But the best players know how to do it. They make it fun, and they make it a little different while you're still doing the same activity. So we know from years of experience what the main personal development principles are, but if you can learn them from a different teacher each month, from a different angle and a different focus, and have a slightly different discussion, because each of us learns things in a different way, and also maybe takes different, picks up on different things from the material we're reading, we can reinforce the same ideas while also learning slightly new ideas from a different angle, which makes the learning even deeper. And it goes from just being an idea in your head to something you'll actually apply into your life. So that's why we really do it. And we usually, pick a part of the book that we're working on, and we kind of use that as a guide for these calls. And then we kind of get off on tangents that are related to personal development, but based on the fact that we're talking about a principle in the book, and we've learned something related to that somewhere else or in our personal life that we think can apply to the conversation. So I think that's cool. And we've talked about this book the last couple of weeks, and one of the things that I mentioned, and I know Josh and Mallory have as well, is it really makes you reflect. This is one of those books where it's not here's what to do, and this chapter's about this, and this chapter's about this. So this one makes you really think introspectively about who you are and what you want and why you react certain ways to different things and all that, which I really like to read these books because sometimes you just kind of go on autopilot. Even if you're doing the right things, you kind of go on autopilot, but sometimes stepping back and looking at what's going on. So I think that's cool. So I'm going to share a few things. You guys are welcome to jump in and share anything you have. I had a few main things that I thought were pretty interesting, but that was kind of from the next chapter after we stopped last time. So one of the concepts, we kind of talked about this last week, but is the whole concept, and we've heard this in many of the books that we've read and courses we've been a part of, and each of us worked in the same sales company before, is Don Miguel talks about understanding your emotions, and that you have to listen to your heart instead of your head, because your head is connected to your nervous system, which is trying to protect you, and the only way it perceives to protect you is to see anything that's a threat, which is a good thing, because it's like hundreds and thousands of years ago, when we weren't as civilized as human beings, we could get chased by big animals or other people that would come after us. Now, stuff like that still happens, but it's very rare. But the thing is that we have that type of reaction to everyday things. People disagree with us. All of a sudden, we set off the same response as if we're being chased by a bear, which actually doesn't make any sense. But that's what types of happen. You see people get offended, and then they get all mad, or get in arguments or fights or whatever over stupid things, and it's actually because they're trying, in a weird way, they're not just trying to stick up for whatever they think it is, they're trying to protect themselves, but in reality it's not as big a threat as whatever the situation may be. But when you listen to your heart is connected more to your spirit, which is going to lead you in the direction of what you were meant to do, and do the things that are based on being most helpful to yourself and to other people. And I find that when I'm reading more of these books and really focused on what we're doing in our group and have a goal in mind, I find that it's a lot easier to listen to your heart than your head. When you're kind of don't have a goal and you're drifting along and you're just kind of going with whatever's going on, and you don't have a routine, or morning routine, or an exercise routine, or reading routine, those are the times you kind of get in your head, and a lot of those times there's not even any real challenge in your life. You just kind of make it up in your head, because there's either not a lot going on, or the few things that are going on that you can focus on aren't going the way you want to. So I think even though it's a small quote, it's a pretty big remark in terms of which one do you focus on. So you guys have any comments on that point, or any experiences in terms of getting caught in your head, or listening to your heart?
I know I've probably had some of them here and there, and I just kind of forget a little bit. Try to see if I can bring one to mind. Mallory, if you have something, you can go ahead if you know what you're going to say, because I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, over the past couple of years, I think when we're younger, while our mind is still developing, it's kind of funny how, we tend to go through stages in our life where when we're like 16, 17 years old, we think that, we know everything that there is to know about life, and, our brain still isn't fully developed, which is so fascinating. And the mind is so powerful, and this book really touches a lot on how powerful it really is. And we learn, it's scientific fact that the frontal lobe doesn't develop in your brain until you're like early to mid 20s, and the frontal lobe is in charge of like your decision making. So that's why sometimes we question teenagers and kids in their early 20s, and I'm saying this now being 29 and having gone through that stage in my life where I don't want to listen to anybody that was older than me, who told me don't make this mistake, or you should do that, you should really think about that before you decide to do it. I didn't listen to those people, and now when I look back, I'm like, oh, they were probably, well, a lot of them were probably right. Because a lot of times I just went with whatever my gut told me to go with, or I didn't really think too much about things. And as we get older, and it's kind of like as we get older and our minds fully develop, and we have more experiences in life that can affect how we make decisions for our future, we sometimes tend to not go with our hearts as much as we did when we were younger, when our mind wasn't fully developed. So it's just like a whole cycle of life that you go through. And then when you start to being a part of this group is amazing, because we get to read these books and really discuss deeper concepts, and just like Eric said, the fundamentals of personal development. And what's great about it is it helps us take a step back and kind of look at our life currently, and think about, are we making decisions based on our heart and our spirit? Is it tied to our spirit, or is it a head decision trying to protect ourselves from whatever it is? And it's really cool to go back, and because our brain is now fully developed, we can think about those things on a lot deeper level. So it's just cool how the whole cycle of life works out that way, where before your brain fully develops, you make decisions with your heart, because that's basically what just all you can do, really. And I'm not saying that people make decisions with just their heart and they do stupid things all the time, but that can happen when we're younger, more so than when we're older. But as we grow older and get more experiences, we realize what truly matters in life, and a lot of times going with our heart and thinking through things, and how it ties to our spirit, can just be really beneficial for, like Eric said, for yourself and for people around you. They start to kind of see the good energy that you put off, and you start attracting great things in your life, and it's just really cool. So
cool.
That's what I have to share.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I kind of reflected back on while I was thinking a little bit is that a couple weeks ago when I was going into work, when I just kind of felt I just felt after one of my shifts that I just didn't, I don't know, I felt like I wasn't making very good decisions or something like that. And I think I was reading one of the chapters in the book that was talking about the autopilot stuff, and it just kind of dawned on me that I'd been kind of, I think I'd just been kind of stuck there. And so I said, for the rest of the night, what can I do to kind of be more observant and be more positive, and what can I do to help people? And I think one of the things that kind of came to me was just to be less afraid to express myself, essentially. So that kind of helps, and I had a much better shift the next night. So
that's awesome. That's cool. That's the whole point, is to apply this stuff that you learn right away into the things that you're doing. And it's so easy, no matter what you're doing, whether you love what you're doing or hate what you're doing, to get on autopilot, because you do the same thing each day. And if you do the same thing each day, then your subconscious mind takes over, because you've learned so much stuff about what you're doing, that it takes that focus of being conscious about what you're doing to actually make sure that you realize that this might be the 100th customer I talked to tonight, but it's the first time that they're talking to me. So keeping that perspective. So that's cool. The next thing I sort of looked at here in this chapter was the concept of the conflict in the dream of the planet. Just talking about the fact that there's 7 billion people on the planet that each have their own version of how things are supposed to be. And, sometimes we think it's like, oh, we have one version and this person is this version. We think about our little circle of, 20 friends or 50 family members or whatever, forgetting the fact that every single person on the planet has a slightly different way about how they think that things should be. So obviously there's going to be, there's going to be conflict because there's no way that we've all had the same experiences to be able to have the same beliefs, and how we can, disagree with people, but not have it go beyond that, and not let our ego, take over. And one of the things that is talked about is this whole concept of how do you kind of get sucked into the whole concept of getting drunk at the party, or the other what is the other one he uses, like being in the fog, or whatever he says, that you get caught back in the fog. And just talking about where can where could it be rooted in that you get sucked into that. And this one is very, very interesting, because this is actually the root of a lot of people's problems. So this one, he talks about prior domestication. It's possible that a person or situation provokes a deep memory of someone attempting to domesticate you and resisting you. Even if you can't remember the event, your subconscious or deep memory is making the connection. As a result, your perspective of the current situation is skewed by, I'm on page 74, is skewed by the domestication of the past. You're seeing the person as a potential threat, and your conscious or unconscious mind has labeled them as such. Even if you don't realize it, you can connect the dots and see that the reason this person bothers you is based on a past experience rather than the current situation. If you can do that, you have begun to eliminate their power to upset you, pulling you back into control. So that's one of the challenges between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, is that the subconscious mind doesn't, it basically says that it basically looks for everything in a situation that can be a threat. So when something goes wrong, it's looking for those things. So if it comes up again, even if that wasn't like the real issue of the problem from the past, if it looks like it's the same thing, then your subconscious mind identifies it as the same thing, which can trigger you to have the same response that you had back then. And so it's like, why did that comment get me so upset, or why did this situation get me so, and you can't even figure it out. It's because your subconscious mind has some attachment to that, whether it's that person, what they're saying, what they're doing, their facial expression, something in your mind from your past sees it as a threat. Do you have something, Josh?
Yeah. So I think, in connection with that, I think that kind of does relate back to the whole example of the saber-toothed tiger or whatever that we would run from when we were old. Like, I'm sure, like in the olden days, if we had to run from a saber-toothed tiger, we kind of had to remember that we had to run from that saber-toothed tiger. And so I think that can be kind of a way that got passed down stuff that could still remain in our heads. So I think there might be something in there.
Absolutely. That is, you're correct. That's what it is that, in the past, it was good to take a literal, I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, then I should, but as we've become more of a people that, lives in houses and has work and has all these things that we do, and it's not as big a threat, but we still make those same connections. But the point is that, so just as an example, this is like the most simple example ever. So, someone goes out with a guy or a girl, they think it's going to work out. It doesn't work out. They break up. And now all of a sudden they say, well, guys or girls, I don't need them, or they're terrible, or whatever. And then for the rest of their life, they're walking around trying to protect themselves from, the group of people that they could date, instead of saying that individual wasn't a good fit, or that, that wasn't a good situation, or whatever. So sometimes we take things that it's like, yeah, that whatever that was, did not work out. But at the same time, really figuring out what it is the thing or the person or the situation was that was the issue, and not taking it to a broader level and say, well, an entire gender or race or religion or whatever the situation is, taking it that far out and having a defense up against all of that, because that makes you very closed-minded and isn't going to help you move forward in life. So it's pretty interesting. So the next one, so there's 3 points of talking about what kind of happens when you get upset with another person or a situation. So the first one was prior domestication. The second one is mirroring, which we talk about this a lot. And even Mallory and I wrote like maybe just 2 paragraphs about this in our book. And what it's talking about is everyone is a mirror. Our reflection of things we don't like about ourselves is the most vivid in those who have the same qualities. In other words, you may see a piece of yourself in the other person, even if you don't realize it. The truth may come as a surprise to some of you, and your initial reaction might be to disagree. But I invite you to look deeper. What characteristic you see in another that you don't like is often a characteristic you see in some degree in yourself. Now, I'll give you a kind of different view of that. A lot of times we get attracted to other people, like if it's like a romantic relationship, because of maybe shared values or shared interests. But a lot of times when it comes to like who you are in terms of either your personality or things like that, a lot of times not necessarily full-fledged opposites attract, but prominent parts of different people. So I know Tony gives the example of the fact that his first wife, she was very quiet and reserved, and she had but he knew that she had a lot of opinions and that she could really be a force for good, and she could speak her mind and really make a difference and all that stuff. So when she met Tony, she loved the fact that he was like that he was like loud and outgoing and went for what he wanted and was totally passionate and all that stuff. And I'm sure there was a part of her that he was like, you know what, sometimes I'm too crazy, too over the top, too go all the time. So I can kind of learn some stuff for her. So in that way, a little bit of opposites attract. But when their relationship sort of came apart, and I'm sure there was some fault of Tony as well, as there always is from both sides. But one of the things he talked about from her standpoint is when their relationship started to fall apart, her criticism of him was, you're always so loud. You always have to take the lead. You always have to be in charge. And he's thinking, wait a second, that's what you were attracted to me for in the first place. So the point is, what he says is that a lot of times if a relationship falls apart, it's because we didn't embrace the part of ourselves that was missing, that we saw in the other person. And then when we don't embrace it in ourselves, we resent it in them because we weren't able to change. So that's what that whole concept of mirroring kind of is talking about. He's talking about something a little different, but that's something that's also very important. But the thing he's talking about is just the concept of, if someone is kind of a gossiper, then and that bothers you that they gossip about other people, then you probably either gossip or hated that you gossiped in the past, so that's why you're mad that they gossip. Just whatever it is the situation, that's the concept of mirroring, is that it bothers you because you either used to do that or still do that or whatever. And the whole point is, if it's not something that's a part of you anymore, you would recognize it, but it wouldn't bother you. You wouldn't get your ego involved. You wouldn't get your emotions involved. You'd be like, oh, that person talks about other people. That's unfortunate, but that's not my thing. You don't let yourself get worked all up about it because, hey, that's not me. That's not what I do. And that's it. But I just think that whole concept of mirroring is very interesting, especially the part that I just talked about, like with the relationships and embracing the other parts, the parts of you that you wish you brought out in yourself. So I don't know if you guys had any thoughts about any of that.
It's funny because I definitely notice when, like, part of the things I've learned to, change about myself, and just the different things that I used to do years ago that I don't do anymore because I realized that it wasn't beneficial for me or other people. If I see someone, kind of doing that same thing that I used to do, it reminds me of myself a lot, and it sometimes will affect the way I think of them. But then we just have to remember that everyone is so different, and there's so many different reasons that we do different things. And it's so good to understand that mirroring concept, but I think it's also useful for us to understand, like, when we feel a certain way about someone, really, if we dislike someone, for example, really looking at it from that mirroring perspective and say, what is it about that person that is bothering me? Like, why? And maybe you can look more into, like, yourself, a character of yourself that maybe you still have a quality that matches what they're doing that you don't like, that you can actually work on for yourself, instead of really putting that negative energy on them, because everyone's their own person and everyone has different characteristics, but it's a really cool concept, that mirroring concept.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've told this story like 10 times before, but it kind of relates. But at one point, I was working as the office manager for our division manager. Mallory was actually one of my assistants. Meg, who's my wife, was one of my assistants. Josh was one of our sales reps. And we had one other assistant manager who's still a good friend of all of ours, and she's a wonderful person. But in this situation, what ended up happening was, and you can't talk about the reasons why, but she was kind of talking, kind of gossiping and talking negatively about some of the people in the office, and then also the division manager. So I kept hearing that, and one day I went to the division manager and I said, "Do you know that this person is saying this about you and this about you, and they're saying this about this person, this about this person, and this about this person?" And the division manager stopped me and he said, just stop. He says, "I don't care what they're saying or who they're saying it about or saying it about me or whatever." He says, "Here's what I hear. I hear that there's someone not motivated because they don't have direction, and that our office is not exciting and not hitting the goals that we want, and that's on you and that's on me. If we figure out how to do that, if we figure out how to make the office fun, if everyone's making money around here, do you think she's going to be talking about me or talking about you or talking about other people?" And I was like, "Well, probably not." And before I left, he said one thing. He goes, "Eric, all drama is caused by an insecurity in yourself." And then he ended the conversation. And I thought about that. And I think at first I didn't quite get it. But what he was talking about is, yeah, you still need to bring up those situations. But instead of going beyond, like, hey, clearly, so he took it as, this person's not motivated, the office isn't hitting our goals, what are we going to do? And I took it as, this person's saying all this bad stuff, let's get rid of them because they're like not a bad egg, but they're bringing back the office. But he was taking it from a standpoint of, hey, why are they doing that? They're doing that because we're not hitting our goals, they're not making money, they're spending their time here. So it was a very good lesson. And if I really were to think about it, one of the reasons it probably upset me so much was not so much that I was a big gossiper, but that I felt like I was working really hard and other people were working really hard and we weren't getting the results that we wanted. But that's what actually caused that, is you're focused on what you don't want and not what you want and not the goals that we have. So, we got back on track after that. So I thought that was good. So the third point in this section about, what is it that really happens when you get yourself in an argument or get yourself all worked up? So 1 was prior domestication, 2 was mirroring, and 3 is attachment. And we've been talking about attachment pretty much this whole book. And one of the things that the author talks about is really putting this stuff into action. And he talks about a little bit of an activity with a few questions, which is something that, you know, I could talk about right now, but we also can all kind of think about as the days go on. And he talks about the next time you're in a situation and you begin to feel angry, defensive, guilty, sad, or anything anything similar arising, the first step is to spot the emotion. Admit it exists, and accept that those feelings are inside you. Just identifying, admitting, and accepting the feeling often has a calming effect and begins the process of releasing them. The next questions to ask yourself are, what is this emotion here to show you? What fears are the words or actions what fears are the words or actions of another activating in you? And 3, what are you trying to control and why? Those are very powerful questions. You know, I thought of a situation that that kind of came up recently where someone basically said something that I do all the time was like a joke or a scam or like whatever. And I got so angry. And you know, so I didn't have the book in front of me at the time, but I was thinking about the concepts of the book. And so it's like, what is this emotion trying to show you? You know, I really didn't think about that, but you know, the second question, what fears are the words or actions of another activating inside of you? So I think the situation is that I guess I get angry when people aren't open-minded to other point of views. And actually, it's interesting because I'm in that situation. I wasn't saying that whatever the other person's point of view was actually wrong in terms of what they do instead of the thing that I do. It was just that they dismissed what I did, if that makes sense. So it wasn't like, okay, so person A does this thing with their life and person B does this thing. Person A says, oh, what you do as person B is a scam and you're wasting your time. Well, it wasn't the fact that they do something different than me. It was the fact that they're saying what I'm doing isn't right. And one of the interesting things that it's just, what are you trying to control and why? The thing that comes up in my mind when those situations come up is, and again, this is, you know, it's good to think these things out loud and talk about them, because it's not like I have the right answer, this is the right approach, because it's definitely not. But what it is I say, the problem with what they're saying or what they're doing is I say, well, okay, whatever I'm doing may be wrong. It totally could. Like, there's any of the things I do in my life could be wrong, like whatever it is. But the problem is when someone else tells me that my thing is wrong, the first thing I think about is their behavior and the things that are wrong with their life. So, you know, basically what I'm saying is, I'll give you an example. So let's say someone tries to give me marital advice, but they're on their eighth different marriage. It's like, okay, well, whatever I'm doing may be wrong. I might be doing a terrible job, but whatever you're doing is not clearly working either. So for you to say that mine is wrong, that's what I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with necessarily whatever you're doing. I have a problem with you saying mine is wrong. So obviously the emotions that come up for me, you gotta work on those. But you know, it's the same thing as someone saying like, you know, all that stuff like organic and vegan and all that stuff, that's all crap. All that health stuff, it's just trying to get you to spend all your money. Well, honestly, if a person said that and they were healthy and they had their own approach and it worked for them, I'd say, okay, you're welcome your own opinion. But if the person's completely sick and tired and has no energy and has terrible relationships because they just don't have any energy, and that bothers me, because it's like saying, my approach might not work for you, but the fact that you're not open-minded to other things is going to hold you back. And to be honest with you, the reason it probably bothers me, like this situation I was just talking about and all these other examples, is because I used to be that way and I hated being that way, and I hate to see other people that way, because I know that if I stayed there, I would have been in big trouble, if that makes sense.
um, if somebody's terribly in debt, but they're trying to give you financial advice,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that, but I mean, the thing is, it's different when someone says, "Oh, you do this? I don't think that works, but I do this." Giving another example or a different approach and all that stuff. It's only when someone says the way you're doing things is wrong. Because as soon as they say it's wrong, I reflect back and say, "Okay, well, what's your approach?" And they say, "Well, whatever your approach is," like, "Oh, this is your approach." Okay, but if your approach isn't really working, I'm sure you're a great person, but your behavior is not producing the result that I'm after, and you're trying to tell me I'm wrong, then how do you know I'm wrong if yours isn't working either? Does that make sense? So there are so many different ways to do different things, right? Take exercise, for example. You could run, you could walk, you could do yoga, you could do whatever. Eating healthy, there's so many different ways that you can eat healthy to get to a different result. So it's not about one is right and one is wrong. It's when someone completely comes at you and one of the things I usually do is I usually get really angry and then I think things through and I say, well, that person's thinking that way because they haven't had the same experience as me. So I catch myself and I get where the person's coming from, but a lot of times you let the emotions get a hold of you before you can have the thought, which is usually the thing that is is most most people's issue, is that your emotions get attached ahead of you, and then you think through, oh, this isn't really a big deal, I don't know what I'm getting all worked up about. But I think if I were to reflect back on those questions, that's what it really is that you know is that if people aren't open-minded and their behavior isn't producing a result that is being produced by what I'm doing for me, then I'm afraid that they're closed-minded, that they're not going to be able to see something that could be a benefit, even if what I'm doing is not beneficial to them. Something else that's the equivalent that could be beneficial to them. So, it's definitely very interesting when you learn this stuff, because then you kind of reflect back, and I'm like, there's a perfect situation of what this book's trying to teach you and trying to work through it and all that stuff. So I think it's really cool because, believe it or not, if you think about it, if you think about what I said, my intention was all good, right? So my intention isn't to like bash the other person. It's actually to be like, well, hey, you're telling me what I'm doing is wrong, but that clearly you're trying to do that to either protect me or to, because you have a different approach or whatever. But whatever you're doing isn't producing the result that you say that you think I'm looking for. So I'm actually thinking that hopefully you'll figure out what works for you to be able to do that. But again, you can't control other people or their actions or anything like that. So that's why a lot of the things that I do, if someone's not in this group, I usually wait until people bring up a situation or they ask about something, and then I'll tell them about my thoughts about it, but then I'll let it go and see if they come back and keep talking about it. Because then if they say, well, do you have a recommendation for this, whether it's health stuff or a chiropractor or whatever, now all of a sudden it's them choosing to do it versus me telling them what to do. Because you guys remember from last week the whole concept of that I told you about Marie Forleo and Tony with their video, that if you push, I'm doing it right now. I'm actually only pushing with my right arm and my left arm is pushing back. I'm not thinking about doing that. But if you literally just let it go and you just go like this and you pull people along, but you only pull the people along that want to come with you, then it's going to make a real difference. So definitely something I'm working on when people kind of say those type of things. So definitely something I'm going to work on is when someone says that whatever I'm doing is just flat out not right, trying to not get the emotional side attached to it, to say that, everyone has a different perspective, but they're not open to whatever this is at the time. But, whatever I'm doing works for me, and that I hope that they find what works for them. So I don't know if do you guys you don't necessarily have to share an example unless you have one, but kind of those things where something kind of triggers you to get kind of either angry or sad or guilty or whatever, kind of like the example I just gave. The actual example is one of the people I work with, I told them about my chiropractor, and they were open-minded to the whole idea of a chiropractor that does soft touch and is really about releasing energy and, all that stuff. So I told them all about it once, and then I stopped. And then I waited till he came back and said, I'm still having these problems. And then I told him about it again, and he goes and sees her now. Well, someone else in the office said, well, where is so-and-so? I go, he's at my chiropractor. He goes to the chiropractor? Why do you go to the chiropractor for? Well, he's got this thing with, his neck, but he also wants to relieve stress. Oh, that's just a giant scam. I went to the chiropractor 10 years ago and I had a problem, and I haven't been back since, and I'm fine. And that's what the whole conversation was. And I'm like, in my head, I just start running through all these things. And like the first thing that came up was, in my head, I'm like, well, from what I know about you, you have this problem and this problem and this problem. So, you don't realize it because you don't go to the chiropractor, but those things are related. Everything's related. So just because you don't have knee problems doesn't mean that it's not, that you're not missing out on something because you don't have some way of releasing energy. So that's what the situation was. But I don't know if you guys have any. Again, it could either be a specific example or just things in general. You notice something kind of triggers you to have one of those emotions because you're trying to control something or have people get your perspective or something like that.
Yeah, I don't really have a specific example. I think, well, I guess I kind of do. I was actually, a lot of times I'll bring the books that we're reading for the month to work, and I'll sit, if I stay at the office in the break room for my lunch break, instead of coming home or whatever, I'll read the book at work. And somebody came up and asked me, oh, what are you reading? And I was like, oh, this book I'm reading actually with a couple of people. We're part of a group. It's really cool. I told her a little bit about it. And she's like, oh, I don't believe in that stuff. And I was like, believe in what stuff? It was just really funny. And my immediate reaction was an emotional one. And it was like, I kind of took offense to what she was saying. But then, as I stepped back and kind of realized that she just had never really been introduced to anything like it before. And just her opinions about the different personal development things that I was talking about, it's because it was brand new to her. And I feel like, she was a pretty negative person in the office. She actually no longer works at the company, but she was pretty negative a lot of the times. And I was like, well, I didn't want to say like, you're really negative, you really should like read some positive books or just get in a mindset of positivity. But it's just so funny where people come from, and the opinions that they have when they don't really have any merit in what you're actually talking about a lot of times, because you're so involved and you like the results that you're getting. Like, I really enjoy these calls every week because they help me to look at my life from a different perspective a lot of times. And it's just it's a great thing. And it was just so funny, her reaction, because it was nothing that she'd ever really been introduced to before. But it's just so funny.
Yeah, so I have an example too that was, it was probably only a couple months ago, but I'm part of a student affairs Facebook group, and one of the people in the group had posted something about something around the idea of whether or not transgenderism is inbred or if it's developed over time or whatever. And most people in student affairs have been kind of taught that, I don't know, maybe taught's not the word, but they kind of have this belief that that transgenderism is it's with you at birth, and like there's nothing you can do to change it, and all that sort of stuff. And I tend to believe the opposite because obviously I've had different experiences and different things like that. But when I tried to share that with a lot of them, I obviously got breached with a lot of negativity, things like that. And it was hard just because obviously I've had such different experiences from most student affairs professionals, but it's hard because it's hard to kind of get your point across when they're so defensive about their ideas too and all that sort of stuff too. So So yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Well, it kind of takes you back to like that combativeness, like Eric said, like when you push
right.
at something and share your opinion about something and somebody else shares it, their opinion that's the total opposite, that can be the combativeness that comes about. But, when you just kind of let it go and, you have your opinion, I have mine, it's okay because I don't think there is any right or wrong in a lot of those types of situations. So
Yeah, eventually I just got to that stage. I was like, we're all humans, so.
I think one of the challenges though is that I very rarely post anything that online that creates like a whole conversation about back and forth about this and that. And it's not because I don't want to have opinions or I don't want to hear other people's opinions. It's actually because, when I sometimes see a post, whether it's by, Tony Robbins, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, whoever the post is, and then you start reading the comments, the first thing that comes to mind, I always says is like, no matter who it is, even if the idea I completely disagree with, I'm like, when I read comments on both sides of every conversation, I always say, but you're missing their whole point. Meaning not that they're right or wrong, is that when you're having a little blurb here and a little blurb here and a little blurb here, if you were talking about something, it would be a lot easier to get your point across. So I feel like there's a lot of arguments online that happen because, like Josh, you're saying, you probably made a comment and people interpreted so many different ways. Whereas if you were talking to them, you would say, hey, look, I was brought up this way, and this is my experience with these type of people, and this is what I believe, and this is my perspective on things. Which, even if you wrote all those words I just said, sometimes sometimes in writing it can just be more difficult. So just to keep that in mind, that in terms of not whether you were right or wrong, more of the fact that sometimes the platform in which you are trying to have that discussion, can be a lot more difficult. But one of the other things I was thinking of, and we can kind of have this be the last topic tonight, is, how I was talking about how I kind of reflected on those questions that those questions there with the situation that I had. One of the things you can do is that you could flip it and be the other person for a second. And in Mallory's situation, you could say, okay, so why is this emotion coming up in me? So why, when this woman sees this personal development book, what is this emotion trying to show her? What fear are the words or actions of another, or just showing you this book, bringing up in you? And why are you trying to control this, and why? Now, without being very specific, I probably can tell you why that woman had that response. The reason is because she probably over her life had goals and dreams and things she wanted to do, and they didn't work out. So to protect herself, she now sees anything that could be perceived as something that could falsely give her a hope that she could get to those dreams and goals as something that's a threat. Because what she's really afraid of is actually not that the book doesn't work. She's afraid of that the book works. Because if it works, it means she wasted all this time being negative and not going after her goals, which again, if you go back to what Tony teaches with the two primary questions, and you say, well, what would happen if the book is right? Well, if the book was right, then it means a wasted time. What does it mean if you wasted time? Well, that means that I'm lazy. What does it mean if you're lazy? Well, it means I'm not contributing. What does it mean if you're not contributing? Well, then I'm not worthy. What does it mean if you're not worthy? Well, then I won't be loved, which is psychological death. So, Tony teaches us all the time. He goes, if I follow your stress, it'll lead me to your deepest fear. And we all have the same deepest fear, which is that we're not enough and we won't be loved. So if you follow those path of questions, you would get there. And, what Josh was talking about, not that it's a little different, but I think that it's the same thing. We all don't, even though, transgender, religion, all this stuff, it's a little bit more deep of a topic. So it's more difficult to prove right and wrong and all that stuff. But when we do get defensive about our view, we can believe what we believe and not necessarily have it get us all upset. But when we get all upset and get defensive, it's actually for the same reason, is that it's not that believe it or not, even though we think our way is right and the other way, yeah, yeah, Josh. It's actually that we're afraid. The fear comes up in, so the love piece of it, like, so doing something from your heart is saying, this is what I believe in, I want to share it with people. That's the love piece of it. When your ego gets attached to it, that's the fear piece of it, which is saying everyone has to believe what I believe, or they have to take on my perspective because I'm right and you're wrong, which is actually the same thing that they're trying to do, which is what we talked about on the last call. So that's kind of the concept there. And it's all this stuff is very deep and very, very difficult to really understand, just because everyone has different perspectives. But it's, I guess, each of us, our job is to take the information we have and do the best we can with the information that we have, and keep learning and keep growing and keep sharing. And as I'm sure you guys have learned, some people will take to it and some people won't. But as long as we're doing our part and doing our best, and we're doing stuff from our heart instead of our head, we're doing stuff to contribute instead of trying to protect ourselves, then that makes all the difference. And one last thing to keep in mind, because, like Josh, with your example, you're talking about pretty heavy topics there, is remember this. Remember that whole concept. So if your goal is to influence someone to believe what you believe, and again, I know you're talking about your conversation. You didn't tell the other people you were wrong. You were just giving them your perspective. But again, when we believe something and we try to push it onto someone else, we do this. But again, if they don't, they automatically push back. So even though you might say, I'm rooted in what I believe and I'm not going to change what I believe, if someone's not willing to entertain and see where someone else's perspective could come from, then there's actually not a way to influence them to actually potentially believe what you believe, because you're threatening their perspective, which is attached to their ego. So you think about the same thing. When someone's trying to get you to change what you believe, what happens? You do this too. So my point is that we have to think from the other person's perspective when we get in these situations, and not only ask ourselves these questions, but pretend we're the other person and ask ourselves those questions as well. So I thought that was interesting. So anything else, any last things that you guys, in terms of anything that you guys underlined, or topics from the book you want to go over, or anything you kind of thought of from based on this conversation we've been having?
I don't really have anything to add to, as far as like a quote from the book or anything, but I will say that it's like, I love that you just said, taking these questions and, asking it from the perspective of the other person. That was like something that I think will be helpful for me, because I usually will just, do those types of things from my own perspective. And that's such a good thing to be able to ask, seeing it from the other person's perspective, and instead of going into it with a combative mindset, going into it with an accepting mindset. Because when you accept somebody's opinion, and you accept the way they are, for, it doesn't matter if you have a dislike or a like for them at all, just that the power of acceptance is huge. So I think that's cool to be able to kind of step in their shoes and see the world through their eyes, because everybody has a different opinion and worldview, and what life should be like and what life is like. And it's just cool to be able to use these tools that we're learning to be able to do that kind of stuff, and expand our own I don't know the word I'm looking for, but expand on our own experiences, I guess, through other people's experiences, if you get what I'm saying. So
Yep.
It's just so cool to be able to read these books and to get this much from them, just by talking about the topics a little bit deeper. So
Cool.
that's all I got.
Josh?
Hey, yeah, there I am. My microphone didn't unmute for whatever reason. I had a question that that I kind of came up when I read a leader chapter in here, so I don't know if you wanted to answer that real quick if you can.
Sure.
But later in the book, Miguel talks about how sometimes when we set goals, we start to attach our self-worth to those goals. And I think I do that really commonly, but I'm just not sure how to stop doing that now. So.
Well, I think one of the things you have to think about is that, and I think about this sometimes too, right? So the goal is something that you want, but literally 5 seconds before you set the goal, it meant absolutely nothing to you. So all of a sudden we're completely attached to something that meant nothing to us 5 seconds before we sat down and decided it was a goal. Now, I know we set it down because there's a reason for it, and we're going to get to do things if we hit our goal, and all that stuff. But if you think about back to Cutco, it's you set a $10,000 push week goal, and if you hit that goal, then you maybe go on a couple of trips, you donate money to a charity, you do some cool things. But the reason you set the goal, that fulfills some of the selfish things, right? Like I'd like to go on the trip, I'd like to donate some money, I'd like to do all this stuff. Not that donating money is selfish, but it's something that matters to you. Whereas what happens in the process, though, is you make more phone calls than you've ever made. You get over the fear of phoning. No doesn't even matter to you by the end of those 2 weeks. You meet with customers. You learn how to handle different situations. Your public speaking goes through the roof. You give talks at meetings. You help out other people. So the point is, sometimes setting a goal is we use kind of the selfish things, the money, the numbers, the trips, the this, as a way to get us started and motivated. But the deeper underlying why behind it is to grow and expand and be able to contribute more and do all these things. So that the point of it is that, if your goal was 10,000 in a push week and you sold 9,999, you hit your goal. You know what I mean? It's $1. Nothing changes if you hit your dollar. And the other thing to keep in mind, right? Because Earl used to say this when we would do push weeks, and maybe even Rick Castro did too. But Earl used to say, I would rather have you do 50 appointments in the push week and sell 9,000 than do one appointment in the push week and sell 10,000. Because the person who had a $10,000 order didn't learn anything, didn't push themselves, didn't overcome any fears. They just went to a rich person's house and they bought all this Cutco. Someone does 50 appointments, sells 9,000. Think about all the phone calls. Think about all the no sales. Think about all the challenges that they overcame. And they still came close to that goal. But who grew and who just backed into making a bunch of money? Because then again, it sets you up for, well, what's next in your life? If it wasn't a push week, it's some other job or some other opportunity. Well, who's going to be more equipped to handle that situation and go after it? The person who literally did nothing and got lucky and made a big sale, or someone who knows how to work hard, knows how to make phone calls, knows how to make a difference? That's the real situation. So I think sometimes it's reminding yourself of the underlying reason why you're going after the goal instead of what the goal actually is. Because the goal itself, if you picked 10,000, it could have been 12,000. If you picked, I'm saving to go on a trip here, it could have been a trip somewhere else. It could have been a little bit not as nice vacation, or it could have been a nicer vacation. It could have been, I'm going to read 5 books, I'm going to read 3 books. So, I think it's really, again, to think about the deeper why behind what you're doing rather than the goal itself. So that would be my answer. Mal, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what you said in the beginning about you set goals. When you set a goal, it literally didn't matter to you until you set it. Like that's huge, because if you think about your life before you set the goal, it didn't matter. Your worth didn't have anything to do with hitting that particular goal that you set for yourself before you set it. So it's so important to know that. And a lot of what we talked about earlier too, about, is our head guiding us or is our heart guiding us, and the decisions we make. And sometimes we can set a goal in our mind's eye that says, this is what, this will help me become successful in this area of my life. That's why I'm setting the goal. But then if it's not really meant to be, or if it's not the path that you're meant to take, your heart will take you to where you're supposed to be, and it might be in the opposite direction of what that goal was. And then if you still think with your head like, oh, I'm a failure because I didn't even hit that goal, but your heart is taking you somewhere else, you can't really base your self-worth on that, because that, it was just something that you set, for whatever reason originally. But if it's not, if it doesn't affect the path that you're supposed to be on, then it doesn't, you shouldn't let it affect. Do your best not to let it affect, the value that you place on yourself, because that's not the goal of goals, of setting goals, if that makes sense.
And I think
Perfect sense.
And I think also the other point of it is if you start talking about like going after a goal and then you're not on track for it, you'll start to say, well, I spent all this time on it and I'm not going to make the money I want, or, this is really hard or whatever. And these are all things that are about you. And remember when we talked about, I know Mallory's kind of familiar because we talked about it at a couple of masterminds. And I know, Josh, you've been to all of Tony's events. He talks about the 6 human needs and about the concept that what really is important is what's at the top of your list, and not at the top of your list in terms of what you want, because we all want love and we all want to be able to contribute, but how we go about our day. And when you think about, you say, I'm going after a goal and I'm not getting what I want, well, that's really having significance at the top of your list and certainty at the top of your list, which if you have those at the top of your list, you're always going to be unhappy, because if you need some outside force to tell you you're important, and if you need to be certain, which means you have to control everything, if that's the only way that you grow and contribute and have any variety in your life and have any love and connection, well, you can imagine why people are so negative, because that's at the top of their list. And Tony doesn't necessarily teach it this way, but if you say the 6 human needs like a story, then it'll sound stupid when it's in the wrong order. So you say, okay, so if I'm completely certain, then I'll be important. If I know I'm really important, then, and only then, will I do something different. And when I do something different, then I'll love myself. And once I love myself, then I'll contribute to other people, which means that I grew. That just sounds, it sounds stupid. Whereas when you say, hey, I'm going to go out there and do my best, and I'm going to, love myself, love other people. I'm going to contribute the best I can. Because of that, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to grow, and because of that, I'm going to have different experiences, which is the need of variety. And when all that's in place, then I can be certain that I am significant. So when certainty and significance at the end of your list, it means that it's based on something about you rather than based on something about something external in the environment that you can't control anyway. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I could keep talking about this stuff all day, but I have stuff to do as well. So I'll let you guys go. Here's what we're going to do for a homework assignment real quick is, since we have a chat going between us, if each of us can come up with by Wednesday a book recommendation for this month, we'll each put it in our chat, and then we can pick which one we want to do, and then maybe the other 2 could be the next 2 months or whatever. So each of us come up with a book recommendation, put it in our group chat before Wednesday, and then we'll kind of pick which one we're going to do first, because I know since we've each picked the last 3 books, so kind of going around again, but if we can each have one ready, and we'll just decide who goes first, that way we can keep it going as it moves forward. So I think that'll be a good idea.
All right.
Sounds good.
Cool, guys. Live the movie. Enjoy the rest of the week, and I'll talk to you on the group chat, and then we'll see you next Monday.
Bye,
All right,
guys.
see ya.
See ya.